All right, welcome to our lecture on the beginning of the senses. We finished off all of the autonomic nervous system, so now we'll finish off the last material that will be for the exam. I've had a couple people ask if we're having a sixth exam. Yeah, we are. I had mentioned that before in previous videos, but just to clarify, and then I'll put an announcement in our course sections that your exam on chapter 14 on the autonomic nervous system and the last half of 13 on the senses, I will open on Friday, actually. So I'll open it on Friday. Nah, probably open it on Saturday. Yeah, anyway. Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Yeah, I'll open it on Saturday, and it'll be open through Monday at 11:59. So Monday, May the 4th is when it's due. And then I had originally said that this, oh, I got weird hair, that our final would be on the 7th, but I'm running into some difficulty in Canvas making that happen. So it may actually be on the 6th. But I have got an email into the powers that be to find out when it is. So I'll let you know on that for sure. But this next exam, so test number 6 on autonomic nervous system and senses, the deadline will be Monday, May the 4th. So, oh, May the 4th be with you. Yay, we get to have a good thing on that day. And like I said, I may open it on Friday. It depends on how I feel. Saturday, Sunday, Monday is plenty of time for you guys to get it done. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you on the senses. As soon as that pops up, there we go. And we'll only do the eye today, and then we'll do the ear tomorrow, and then we'll finish up some stuff. We'll do some review on Friday, and then you'll be ready for your exam. All right, so this video recording may not take us, it may take us the whole hour. I don't know. We'll see. Okay, so the first part that we want to do, it's not just going to be on the eye and the ear, but it's going to be, that's the majority of the information on the senses, but we are going to do some stuff on taste and smell. So here is taste and smell, and then the light characteristics and the sound, or the light objectives and the vision objectives and sound objectives. All right, so let's go to the picture first of your tongue so that we can understand the organization of the structure of the tongue. When you look at your tongue, it's all bumpy on it, and you got little tiny bumps. Yeah, I'm looking at mine right now. That you can't see as much. And then you've got bigger bumps on your tongue. So the little teeny tiny bumps on your tongue, any of the bumps on your tongue, are actually referred to as papillae. Anything that comes to a point is a papilla. We have multiple papillae throughout our bodies because it was a good word to use, so we use it several times for different places in our body. So if we look at this picture of the tongue, normally you call the bumps on your tongue, they're taste buds, but they are not. So they are papillae. And then the bigger bumps that are not as numerous on your tongue are called fungiform papillae. And then you have some big ones here in the back. Now these just give texture to your tongue, so to speak, so that it's not, smooth. So you have some surface area, some friction as you're moving stuff around in your mouth as you're eating and swallowing. But the taste buds are actually surrounded or down at the base of the papillae, down in the epithelium. So here's the epithelium that covers your tongue, okay, stratified squamous epithelium of your tongue, and embedded within that will be actually the taste bud itself. So here we can see down around these circumvallate, so these big circle ones right here, down here, these little teeny tiny structures here, those are the actual taste buds. So a taste bud is rather complicated or rather complex in its anatomy. So you have the actual cells that do the tasting. Those are the gustatory cells. These are the yellow ones. And at the end of the yellow ones, we have these little extensions, these little hairs right here. And it's on these hairs, they didn't label that right. That one shouldn't have a hair because it's purple. Oh, well, anyway. But you need to have a specific structure for taste to bind to the shapes at the end in these gustatory hairs in order for them to be stimulated. And we'll get into what is that all about in a minute. Structurally speaking, they're chemoreceptors, so they're responding to chemicals. So yeah, they have to fit in, but they have to fit in because of their chemistry. And you will have certain receptors for certain chemicals that are in our food. And there's only 5 basic tastes that we can taste, and I'll get all that into in a minute. I just want to finish off the anatomy. So if you notice with these yellow cells, okay, these gustatory cells, and then we have these supporting cells, that they are innervated by branches of some cranial nerve. So there's 2 cranial nerves that we have for taste. So we'll just put them right here. So these taste fibers would be cranial nerve number 7 and cranial nerve number 9. IX. Okay. See. Okay. But anyway, so cranial nerve 7 is the facial nerve. Cranial nerve 9 is glossopharyngeal nerve. And so depending on the location of these taste buds, then it would either be the cranial nerve 7, the facial nerve going to it, or it would be the glossopharyngeal nerve. And we'll talk more about that in a minute too, the location of our tastes our taste receptors, our taste buds, once we finish this off. So then once the chemical binds to the hairs that are right here, okay, to the hairs that are here, then that elicits an action potential that then will create an action potential in the nerve fibers, so the axons of the sensory neurons of cranial nerve 7 and cranial nerve 9. And then that'll run to your brain. It'll go to the gustatory center there, right by your temporal lobe, and then that's where we pick up our taste from. And so here's just another shot, an actual photomicrograph of a taste bud. And so whatever we're going to taste must dissolve in the saliva that's in your mouth and then be able to go into the taste pore. If you taste something dry, if it's not wet, it won't work. You need to dissolve it in your saliva and then go ahead and taste it. Okay, so let's go back then to our taste buds then. So they are the sense receptor organ for taste found in the papillae. So the gustatory cells are the actual receptors. Okay, so the gustatory cells, individual gustatory cells will have receptors for these 5 chemicals. And we'll talk about, well, what are the chemicals that give us sweet, sour, bitter, salty, and umami. Okay, so sweet is a receptor for carbohydrates. Okay, so specifically disaccharides, because that's what sweet is all about. So carbohydrates. Sour are acids. So things that have hydrogen ions that are released in them taste sour. Bitter are a lot of different things. Alkaloids are bitter. Bases are bitter. Mostly the alkaloids, but there are other kinds of things that have a bitter taste to them. Think about when you have to take some medicine, especially if it's like acetaminophen or something like that, and it doesn't go down, right? And it dissolves on the back of your tongue, and then you're like, oh, and it tastes really super bad. Okay, that's the bitter receptors are being stimulated. Now the interesting thing, well, I'll do it in just a minute. I'll come back to that. Salty receptors are for sodium chloride, obviously. So the more sodium chloride that dissolves from the food that you eat, that dissolves in your saliva, the more the salty receptors are going to be stimulated. And then umami. Umami is actually a glutamate receptor, and glutamate is an amino acid. And I'm just going to give you some. Oh, let's just do this. Foods that stimulate I can tell you some of them right now. Tomatoes stimulate umami receptors. Stimulate umami receptors. And meats, obviously. A lot of Middle Eastern and Far Eastern cooking, native kinds of cooking. Yeah, glutamate. Fish, shellfish, cured meats, meat extracts, mushrooms, vegetables like ripe tomatoes, Chinese cabbage, spinach, celery, green tea, hydrolyzed vegetable protein, fermented aged products. Oh, that's nice. So people that like to eat, so if you like Mediterranean food, if you like Oriental food, Japanese, Chinese, Korean, that kind of food, if you like food from the ocean, so that's going to be the umami receptors. Mushrooms, dried shiitake mushrooms. So that gives you some cheeses, shrimp pastes, fish sauce, soy sauce, Vegemite, and Marmite. So if you're from Australia, then you really like that too. Let's see. So the tongue map is wrong. I'm going to tell you about that too. Okay. Now, one of the things that, okay, now we get into more complicated stuff that I want to talk to you about. Oh, I just forgot what I was going to say. Crap, you guys. Oh, I know. So a lot of, if you go to a Chinese restaurant, that they will put a substance in the food known as monosodium glutamate, and it's a flavor enhancer. But the reason why it's a flavor enhancer is because it has glutamate in it, and then that will stimulate not just the sweet and sour and salty, sweet, sour, salty taste on your tongue, but they'll also stimulate the umami receptors. And so then it gives you a whole new flavor to your food if you use monosodium glutamate as well. But a lot of people complain about getting a headache when they eat MSG. And so a lot of times you'll go to a Chinese restaurant or in a packaged Chinese food, and it'll say no MSG in the food. Okay, now some of you, okay, so let's just read this. A chemical must be dissolved in saliva and contact the gustatory hair in order to be tasted. All right, now some of you, maybe when you were in high school or something, or you've heard about it and said, oh, you know what? I did a thing where we did a tongue map. And so the idea is that, okay, back here are the bitter receptors, and then up here on the front are the sweet, and then here on the edges, I think is what it is, are the sour, and then salty, I don't know, something like that. The reason why I don't have that memorized is because it's wrong. There are no specific locations for, yes, Annette, hang on to that thought, and I'll talk about that in a minute, outside of, because people watching this don't know what your question was. This is wrong. Your taste receptors are everywhere on your tongue for all of your tastes. However, there are some bitter receptors concentrated here in the back, because most things that we eat that are bitter are toxic, that we could eat are toxic. And so we don't want to swallow them. And so we get the gag reflex, and that'll make us spit it back up again. Okay, so you're right in not wanting to eat that acetaminophen, because it is potentially toxic to us, but yet at the same time it takes away our pain. So anyway, but there is no tongue map. That doesn't work. Now, Annette's question was, what about spicy foods? Are spicy foods, what did she say? Pain receptors. Is spicy sensed by pain receptors? Absolutely. You people that like that like spicy foods, the hotter the better, you're all masochists, because that's all it is. And those pain receptors are all over your tongue. And, oh, I just forgot. I'll look it up really quick. So what's the deal? Well, things that are hot, like peppers, the, oh, I almost had it. The word, that thing that I'm, let's see. So when we look at, pepper, oh, let's just, oh, Scoville, there we go. So I'm going to put that right there. I got another chat. Do your taste buds change? My mom always said when I was a kid that I had to try the foods I dislike because my base taste buds changed. That is such a fabulous question. I often talk about that, but I hadn't even thought about that today. But okay, your taste buds never change, but your brain changes. And so as you get older, the food that you like is all a conscious kind of thing. It's all in your cerebral cortex. Yeah, it's all in your head. If you don't like that food, there's nothing wrong with it. You're just weird. No, you're not just weird. But yet our tastes, okay, quote unquote, tastes change, but nothing's happening to our taste buds themselves. They are there. Their sensitivity is not going to change, nothing. But what you like and dislike as it goes through your limbic system and what it smells like and all of that, that is definitely going to change. That is all a conditioned reflex, liking foods, not liking foods. There isn't anything innate about food being bad or good, and therefore we should like it and enjoy it, or fear it and hate it. There's no, food's not like that unless it's bitter, and then we know, oh yeah. But all the rest of it is just us, our own personal preferences. So yes, it's important, because as we mature, then we sometimes become less picky. I don't know. My mom's 94 and almost 95, and she's pretty picky. And I'm just like, okay, whatever, deal with it. I eat, and this is kind of bad. I eat for food. I eat for nourishment. I don't eat for pleasure. And a lot of times, and I'll just be like, okay, I'm hungry, whatever feeds a hole, you know, I just need to make that hunger thing go away. And I just grab the easiest thing sometimes, and I don't really even care what it tastes like. So that's weird, I know, but food's just not, it's not a priority in my life. And but that's a mental thing too. So anyway, yeah, I could spend another hour just talking about liking things, but that was great. Thanks, Annette, for that. So let's go back to the pain issue here. Okay, so there is a chemical in peppers known as capsaicin. Capsaicin. Oh, I'm gonna spell that wrong. Oh, let me find out how to spell that. Oops, capsaicin. Oh, there it is. I did. Okay, A-I. I knew there was an extra letter in there somewhere. Say, oh crap, I lost my thing. Somebody texted me. Okay, there it is. Okay, so capsaicin is the chemical that gives us pain. Okay, so capsaicin, oh, I should have kept typing, equals pain. And the more capsaicin a particular pepper has, the higher it'll score on what's called the Scoville scale. So green peppers are like a 2. I mean, they have nothing, you know, and you can look it up. Habaneros are super high on the Scoville scale, and then I think ghost peppers are even beyond that. Jalapenos are kind of somewhere in the middle, I think, so they're not particularly hot. But yeah, they are all pain stimulators. And so, but here's the funny thing about capsaicin, you guys, is that we use it, I mean, you know, it's going to make our tongue burn and it's going to hurt. And so, you know, if you're like that and you like that feeling of spicy things, then yeah, you are stimulating pain receptors in your tongue, the nociceptors. However, capsaicin, when we use it as a topical cream, like an ointment, actually will deaden pain. So if you have a joint pain or a muscle pain or something, we have capsaicin in those creams and rubs that will actually stop the pain out there in your skin. So I don't know how that works, and they need to understand more about that. But anyway, it's kind of interesting. Okay, so there is taste. Now, if we go to the next slide, well, I'm glad we did this. I never have enough time to talk about taste like I want to, and now I do. Okay, so we did that. Now here is where the receptors go. Actually, there's a little bit of vagus nerve input too from the back of your throat, but these are the two important ones, the facial nerve and glossopharyngeal nerve. So make sure, actually, let's make sure you know all three. So facial nerve, glossopharyngeal nerve, and vagus nerve are all for taste. They're all going to go through the medulla oblongata, this tract of the solitary nucleus. Then it's going to go through your thalamus. Oh, look at that. It's going to go to our thalamus, right? Because all sensory input is going to come in through the thalamus. This is going to be part of the reticular formation right here, the solitary nucleus here. And then it's going to send it out once it synapses in the thalamus, and the thalamus decides, oh yeah, your taste, you go over here to your temporal lobe, right here, where the gustatory cortex is for sensing taste. So I don't know, you know, it can go somewhere else out here, and then I don't know how it affects what you like and what you don't like. But a lot of times I don't like is because it has a funny smell to it. So smell, well, taste is actually at least 80% smell. You know, and here's the thing, I wish that we were here so we could have done this in lab. When we do taste, I have you close your eyes, and then your partner sticks a Jolly Rancher in your mouth, and then you just roll the Jolly Rancher around your, first you plug your nose in, you close your eyes. Then your partner sticks a Jolly Rancher in your mouth, and then you keep your nose plugged, and then you roll around the Jolly Rancher in your mouth to see if you can distinguish which flavor Jolly Rancher it is. Now you can't, okay? For the most part, you can tell sour, you know, because like green apple is sour, and I don't know, maybe some of the red ones are sour watermelon, I don't know. But you can kind of get an idea on that. But then there's the sweet ones, like the blue raspberry is not very sour at all. And so it's just, and grape, you know, they're pretty much straight up sweet. So you can taste that they're sweet, but you know, it's like, I don't know. I have no idea what flavor this is until you let go of your nose. And then it's like, oh my gosh, there's grape, there's green apple, there's watermelon, cherry, strawberry, whatever the orange flavor or the red flavors are. Because smell and taste go together. So taste, you know, we can only taste 5 different things, but we can smell thousands of different things. And when we eat, let me go to this picture. When we eat, then the food goes in our mouth, but then it also goes, it can go up the front in our nostrils in the front, but it can also go up behind our palate into the back of our throat and go up to our nose. So as we swirl the food around in our mouth, and more odorant molecules are released to bind with the receptors up here in the olfactory bulb, and allow us to smell the food that we're eating. So you've probably noticed, if you had a cold or a stuffed up nose or a sinus infection or something like that, how difficult it is to, you know, taste food. Food is like, ugh, I don't want to eat this because it just doesn't taste like anything. That's because you can't smell it. There are people who rely on their sense of smell for their livelihoods. Wine tasters, they're called sommeliers, can ensure their nasal epithelium right here, or their olfactory epithelium, that in the event that they get a cold or an infection or something, they can draw on that insurance money, because they make their money being able to distinguish very, very subtle differences between vintages of wine. And so, you know, you can have a rosé, or you could have a Cabernet or a Merlot, or, you know, various different kinds of wine flavors, first of all, types of wine grapes. And then there are differences within the grapes, within like a Merlot grape, where you can tell what the vintner was. So what winery, thinking wine farm, what winery the wine came from, and they can also tell the vintage of the wine. So there are some years, because of how the crops grew, that the grapes from this particular winery have a little bit different flavor than other years that they grew grapes at that winery and distilled the, or not distilled the wine, but fermented the wine. So and they have to be experts. They have to be able to distinguish that. And so even though they're tasting the wine, even though they're wine tasters, they're really wine smellers more than anything. Okay, so let's go back to what smell is then. So the olfactory epithelium at the very, very top of your nasal cavity, up there where the cribriform plate is, we have bipolar neurons. Watch, I'll show you the picture in just a minute. That can replace themselves. They can mitotically divide during your lifetime. And they have a specific protein for a specific odorant. And so the odorant must also be volatile. It must be in a gas, and it must be able to get up in this mucus and stimulate these axons, these little, well, I guess they're dendrites of bipolar cells. So these are the receptors for smell. So they're going to pass through the olfactory epithelium, and they're going to go up through the holes in the cribriform plate of the ethmoid bone, so cribriform foramina, and then they're going to synapse with these sensory neurons that are here in the olfactory bulb, and then they're going to run on back to your brain for perception of smell. So taste and smell are very, very tightly held together as far as what your brain perception is. And then same thing, there are the molecules, couldn't think, or the dendrites have receptors for, they have chemoreceptors there in your nose. So taste and smell are chemoreceptors. Okay, hot and cold, again, are thermoreceptors. And ice cream versus soup, so we have texture, so we have touch receptors that can determine the texture of things. Obviously, ice cream and soup are going to be flavor differences inherent in them. You're going to not have sweet in your soup like you're going to have ice cream. You're not going to eat a savory ice cream unless you go to like downtown Disney and you go to that one place. It's a funky ice cream place in downtown Disney. I mean, they have them a lot of other places too, but you can get like black olive and something else flavored. I mean, weird flavored ice creams. Oh, I had tried a lavender ice cream because I really like lavender smell, you know, and so it's not so good. It kind of has a weird lavendery aftertaste. So yeah, it's not just so Annette's question, hot and cold. So those will be the thermoreceptors. Ice cream and soup, again, thermoreceptors. Even textures, those are going to be the mechanoreceptors, the touch receptors that are on your tongue as well. My oldest daughter is kind of finicky about textures in her mouth. That doesn't bother me except for pulp in orange juice. And that makes me absolutely nauseous just to think about it, because if I drink orange juice with pulp, it's like drinking hair. And yeah, that's not going to happen in my life. So I had this, when I drank orange juice as a kid, Mom always had to strain it until they had pulp-free orange juice. And then I don't drink orange juice because it's far too sugary. If I'm going to drink a liquid with sugar in it, you better believe I'm going to drink my Coke. So I substituted Coke for apple or for orange juice. How weird is, or orange juice for apple? I mean, orange juice for Coke, but anyway. Okay, so there's that. Okay, does anybody have any more questions? I think I've covered taste and smell well enough for the exam. So, but if you just have like cool questions about things, I'll answer them as we go along. Okay, so we're going to go into the eye. We're going to go really quickly through the eye structures here because this is all the stuff that we did in lab. So we have conjunctiva. That's the mucous membrane covers the eye, produces a lubricating fluid. See these little blood vessels in here in her eye? I'm guessing it's a her. She's got nice eyelashes. Could be a guy with really great eyelashes. I don't know. But these little blood vessels that we see are in the conjunctiva. I guess I don't have it anymore. Yeah, it's pretty much gone. I busted one of those the other day. They just break. They just pop. Especially I got one in the corner of my left eye that likes to pop every now and again. And so it burst, and then it, because there's no place for it to go, it just fills all of the conjunctiva all in here. So my eye was all just bloody red all in there, and I looked really scary. You know, some demon movie or something I was a character in, or Darth Maul or something like that. Anyway, so that's what those are. Those blood vessels are in the conjunctiva of themselves to nourish the surface of your eye and the conjunctiva, and sometimes they pop, and without you even doing anything about it. Okay, so that's the conjunctiva. There it is again. What else do we want to say? Okay, lacrimal fluid. So lacrimal fluid are your tears that will be produced in the lacrimal gland. And why do we need tears? Well, obviously to moisten and lubricate our eye, but because your eyeball is out there on the front lines of everything, of your environment, there's a lot of crap out there that can cause infection. So we have two things in your eye besides mucus, two things in lacrimal fluid, I mean tears, that help protect. One are antibodies. They're called IgA antibodies. And we'll talk more about them in the immune system. So don't forget this over the summer for when we take in the fall, that there are antibodies in your lacrimal fluid. And there's also a chemical called lysozyme in your lacrimal fluid that specifically attacks gram-positive bacteria. So for those of you that might be in micro right now, there's a whole group of bacteria that have an outside, a thick outer coating, so to speak, on their cell walls called peptidoglycan, and lysozyme will selectively target peptidoglycan. And most of the bacteria that we find out in our, like on our skin and everything, are gram-positive anyway. Staph and strep organisms, those are all gram-positive. So we want to have something in case they decide to go rogue on us and start to infect us, that we've got that lysozyme in most of our body secretions to keep them at bay. All right, so there's those. We've got the extrinsic eye muscles control the movement of the eye. Strabismus is lazy eye, where you have a congenital weakness of the one of the muscles, and so your eye's not going to track together with the other one. You could be cross-eyed. Your eye could go out the other way, go laterally, but here are those extrinsic eye muscles there. So you don't need to know the 6 of them, but there they are. Okay, so now we want to take a look at what are the structures that are going to refract light. So refract means to bend. And what we need to do is, light's coming in from all sorts of angles that in what we're looking at. And so what we need to do is focus those light rays, just like a laser. So we're going to take these structures to bend the light enough so that when the light actually makes it through to the back of our eyeball, let me get a thing in here. Oh, green will work. Okay, so the light rays are going to come in from different places, especially if they're up close to us, that they're going to come in all sorts of angles, but light will only travel in a straight line. And so we got to get it back here. Are we just going to waste this light ray because it should just keep on going down the other side? No, we have to bend this baby, and we have to bend it a lot till we get it there. This one, not so much till we get to this focal point. This one's pretty straight on, so I don't have to do a lot of bending to it. And so it's going to go through less thicker parts, you know, more straight on, less thicker parts of the eye, just like our atmosphere. You know, why does the moon look big when it rises and sets, and it looks super tiny when it's up high? Well, it depends on the amount of, you know, what is the angle of incidence, and what is the amount of atmosphere that it's passing through. The more atmosphere you pass through, the bigger it's going to magnify the object that you're looking at. So it's going to look bigger. But then when it's coming directly down through the smallest part of the atmosphere and not through, you know, a glancing angle like on the horizon, at the zenith in the sky, you know, the very highest peak in the sky, the highest, you know, like 90-degree angle to us, or 180-degree angle to us, it's going to go through the least amount of atmosphere, and therefore be bent the least, and therefore look at the smallest. Okay, so it's all about, it's optics. Yes, it is. And that's what our eye is. So then we'll bend these guys. I'll come back here and bend this one a whole lot. Okay, so that's what we're trying to do with these refractive media, is bend them so that they can meet back here on the fovea centralis. Now, if I'm looking at something, so this would be like a book. Maybe I'm looking at a book up close. Okay, so here's my, and I'll bring my book. Okay, so there's my book that I'm reading, and it's up close, so I have to bend my light rays a whole lot. But let's say I'm watching a movie, or I'm watching the TV. Okay, so here's my eyeball, and then here's whatever I'm watching on TV. Okay, just like that. So the light rays are pretty parallel because they've traveled a long distance, and they've had time to get to your eyeball and then not have to be bent as much to get into your eye. So when we look at things that are close up, oh, laws, we have to bend those light rays a whole lot to get them to the back of the eyeball. When we look at things far away, we don't have to do that as much. So what allows the difference? There was a point to this, friends. Okay, so we're gonna move through these 6, I think I have 6 of them, refractive media, and then that's probably as far as we'll get today. All right, so the first one is the cornea. So it is the transparent 1/6 of the sclera, very front of the eye, well supplied with nerve endings from the cranial nerve 5. Let's add that. Okay, so CN5, 1 actually. So it's the first branch of the cranial nerve number 5. So that you're protective. You know, if somebody's going to poke you in the eye, you're going to try to pull away. Let's see what else. Very regenerative and transplantable because there's not direct blood vessels, obviously, going to the cornea so that they get in the way. You know, your cornea has to be very transparent. It grows back easily, but you can transplant it with anybody's eyeball. You don't have to, not their eyeball, their cornea. So if you got a corneal transplant, it doesn't matter who the donor is. You know, most cases, if we're donating, we need to find a match for the tissue that we need. We don't have to. We can just take a cornea from anybody and replace it. I'm going to go ahead and put this in here just so we can, oops, remember this about my daughter. Oops, keratoconus. Okay, so with keratoconus, she has a very curved cornea that is very thin on the pointy part of the cornea, so that if you let it go, you will have to transplant it. And that is what we were trying really hard to avoid, because she is so young for keratoconus that her specialist was like, oh, let's just make sure we don't have to do a corneal transplant. And you know what? Corneas are so crazy. That's all her doctor does, is just corneas. I mean, you know, there are some specialties that are so specific that they just work on people's corneas all day long, that there's that many problems that can happen to them. So anyway, that's crazy. All right, so the cornea is the #1 bender of light rays, the very most important refractive medium. Because no matter what you're looking at, far away, up close, the cornea is always going to be bending the light rays. Now we're going to do some perfection to the bending of light rays. So we're going to have the aqueous humor, which is the clear fluid similar to plasma, forms and drains continuously. We talked about that. Filters from the ciliary body, drains into the canal of Schlemm or the scleral venous sinus, which I'll show you in just a minute. And it maintains the intraocular pressure. We talked about that in lab, making sure that the fluid inside of your eyeball does not, oops, that's why I can't go anywhere, that it doesn't push on the optic nerve and then make you go blind. So here is where, let's put a little, okay, so here is, that's gross. Let's erase that. Okay. So here is where aqueous humor is found. So right there in the front of your eyeball in the anterior segment or anterior cavity. So it's going to come up through the ciliary body, come through the behind the iris, through the pupil, and then it's going to drain out into that little spot there. So you've got to make sure that that drainage always happens, or too much pressure will build up and then will kill the nerve and blood vessels here that comes in the back of your eyeball. Okay, so that's the aqueous humor. Then we have vitreous humor. No, then we have the lens, that comes next. So biconvex means it curves outwards on both sides of your eye. It's transparent, obviously. It's very flexible because you're going to scrunch it up and stretch it out and scrunch it up and stretch it out. And it's held in place by suspensory ligaments. So if we go back to this picture, so here is the lens right here. There's the suspensory ligaments. When we look at things up close, it'll be scrunched up. When we look at things far away, then the suspensory ligaments will pull on it and stretch it out. Normally it wants to be scrunched up in a whole small thing. And so we have to contract our muscles to make it small, release the tension on the suspensory ligament so that the lens will bunch back up again. But that's what makes your eyes tired when you read something, is because you've been looking at something up close and these ciliary body muscles have been contracting for a long time and they get fatigued. All right, so there's the lens. And then back here is the vitreous humor. So this is jelly-like material that helps keep the retina and the choroid up against the sclera so that these layers of your eye don't fall out, and then make sure that the light is bent as it passes through back to the fovea centralis. So we got that. Clear lens helps keep the retina in place. Forms embryonically, lasts a lifetime. That's why if you get something poked in your eye, do not remove it on your own, because your vitreous humor could leak out. So we've got to let a professional remove that object from your eye without losing the vitreous humor and then potentially losing your vision. Okay, so all of the light must fall on the fovea centralis, which is on the retina where the rods and cones are. It's located directly behind the lens on the retina, which is only cones. So make sure you know that fovea is only cones for color, okay? The rods are going to be everywhere else, and we're going to use those in light and dark and peripheral vision, but our light and dark and peripheral vision is not as good as what is right in front of us because of the lack of cones that are going to be out there on the sides. So if we go back to the picture right here, so here is the fovea. It's just a dot, like we said in lab. So it's just this little dot right here with just cones. And then I'm going to have a macula lutea, which is going to be cones too, but not as abundant as what we have concentrated right here on the fovea. So that's where we want the focal point to fall when we look at things far away. And you may have heard of something called, just put this right here, is macular degeneration. Oops. There are two forms, dry and wet macular degeneration, where that portion of the retina degenerates, and then you have blindness. Now, what's crazy about macular degeneration is, like, if I'm looking at something, okay. So if I'm looking at something, I'm looking at a scene, you know, there's like trees over here, and maybe there's a pond and some birds. Okay, if I have macular degeneration, there will be, oops, a dark spot right in the middle of my vision. I will not be able to see what I look at directly. I will only be able to see the things that are on the sides, because that's where the light rays are falling. So whenever we lose our center vision, then we've got macular degeneration. Okay, let's see where we're at. Boom, boom. That's a great place to stop. Okay, so we will stop here for today, and then we will, tomorrow when we come to class, then we'll finish up vision, we'll start hearing, we'll finish off hearing on Friday, and then Monday we'll start reviewing for the final. So Monday and Wednesday probably, well, I don't know. Depends on if we have to take the final on Wednesday. We may review Monday and Tuesday. So anyway, that's what's coming up. Just remember, you have an exam on by Monday, May the 4th, on this stuff that we finish up this week and the autonomic nervous system. Okay, does anybody have any questions before we end this session? I just had to make sure I was still recording. Okay, well, if not, then I'll stop and I will see you tomorrow. Bye. Oh, at 11 o'clock tomorrow. Okay, bye.